thank everybody for coming. As most of you know, this event is very dear to my heart. I want to thank our speakers, Dusty and Grace and Melissa and Jolene Irving. If you want to go over, she's doing soft touch with essential oils and they are amazing. And Deanne is there with resources. We're going to start out with Dusty, if you want to take these, and that'll pass it around. That'll give you some idea of the essential oils. Thank you.
Did you have a question? Was there any questions?
I was curious why it's dear to your heart, because I don't know you.
Oh. Both of my boys are on the spectrum, and he didn't want me to say anything. My oldest has tried to commit suicide twice.
Oh.
He's been bullied because he's on the spectrum. Just thoughts.
Yeah. Well, bless you.
I feel like not just children, adults need love and compassion with mental health, all of that, drugs, alcohol, it just all intertwines. And when I came up to Dusty and asked him if he would be willing, and Grace and Jolene and Deanne and Melissa. But yeah, any other questions?
Thank you. Bless you.
I was wondering, so yeah, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Dusty Hone. I'm actually from Cedar City, so from kind of a nearby town, not too far, but not too close, I guess. I do drive here once a week and do work here in the community. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. So I do therapy with kiddos and families and couples and individuals of all ages. And this is Gemma. If you want to introduce you probably know her.
I do. I see a lot of faces that I know. So I'm Gemma Carter. I'm an intern for clinical mental health counseling. I'm not leaving teaching. I'm staying in teaching and gonna do both. And anyways, we're just working my way to get licensed with Dusty, and I got hired on with Sandstone. So yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, so the main gist of our presentation is just to raise kind of mental health awareness, right? It's just one of those things that is, I don't know, sometimes hard to talk about, and sometimes we don't know all the ins and outs of it, and it can be awkward whether you're just a parent or a kid yourself, or even like you're dealing with friends, or you're in church leadership or anything like that, right? There's all these different avenues where mental health comes up, and we just want to raise that awareness and kind of give everyone this idea that, hey, this is something that it's okay to talk about. It's okay to kind of get the word out there and ask how people are doing, right? So just starting out, so mental health obviously touches every family regardless of background. As you just heard, right, it touches all of us, right? At a family basis, at a community level. So it's just one of those things. And again, our goal today is to build just that understanding, raise that awareness, and offer practical, whether it's parenting or community tools, just to help us all out. Let's see, resources do exist, hope exists, and small actions can make big changes, right? I know I kind of grew a love for Panguitch myself and surrounding areas through wrestling, right? I've been doing wrestling camps here for 5-6 years. I wrestled in college at Oklahoma State and would come back here, and so I had lots of relationships here through that. And as I kept hearing about some things happening in the community, whether it was a suicide or just anything with mental health, it just kind of drove me to want to come here. And so that's why Sandstone, that's why we reached out to Panguitch, this community. And when we very first got here, we asked, what are the needs of the community, right? And we built programs around that. And that's why we're working in the school district. We're, like I go to Tropic as well. We're working in the jail system, right? Which we're just starting up literally this week. So, and then we're helping out the community. So that's what kind of got us here, just so you're asking. Any questions so far about any of that? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, you're doing great.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see, so just mental health in general, right? So 1 in 5 children and adults experience a diagnosable mental health condition. Mental health, right, kind of is this idea of just brain health, just do you have a healthy brain, right? It's just like, do we have a healthy body? Because just like physical health, it requires care, attention, and support. Everybody experiences symptoms of anxiety, depression, autism, etc., right? We all kind of experience that, these symptoms of them. Doesn't mean we're diagnosed with them, right? But we all have experiences with them. And so to kind of level the playing field, everyone knows what it feels like to be anxious, right? Everyone knows what it feels like to be depressed, sad, to deal with those symptoms. And so you can be a helper, right? In helping the community, you can be a help to normalize some of these things, right? Yeah, and I like to say, all of us experience those for different reasons, at different times, at different levels, right? Across our life. And then just kind of some parenting skills, just these evidence-based tips. Sorry, I'm going to be reading a lot because this is a lot of information your way. So if anyone has any questions, just yell at me and I will stop, and Gemma as well. So, so with therapy, right? When we do therapy with families and kiddos, specifically, and teenagers and whatnot, the first thing I focus on with parents is structure, right? Structure of parenting. So what is structure? It's roles, rules, boundaries, right? Kind of those different things. Safety is the second thing. And what we mean by safety is just that kids have a safe place to go talk to their parents, that they obviously feel safe around them, those different things. And then consistency, right? Being consistent with the structure and consistent with that safety. So those things go a long way. This is a tough one. I mean, we're all people in here. We all have our own experiences with kids, with nieces and nephews, whatever it is, right? Or just different family members. But this idea of curiosity over criticism, right? So instead of saying, what's wrong with you, you might approach that differently with curiosity and say, just help me understand what you're experiencing right now, right? Just a different way of phrasing it to help them not feel, I guess, attacked or like you're assuming that something's wrong with them, right? Because that often shuts people down. And so coming from that curious stance is helpful. This idea of what we call emotion coaching, yes?
I was just gonna ask, is there things that parents can pay attention to let them know, like, oh, this is a good sign that they probably need some counseling or they probably need some help?
Yes, we will get to that. That's a great question. I appreciate that question very much, actually, right? Because we're all, and again, that's what we're talking about in this presentation is how can we raise your awareness to see those symptoms, to see those things so you know how to and what to do, right? So, great question. Yes, so this idea of emotion coaching is just this idea of, as a parent or just as an adult or community figure, being able to recognize what your emotions are or your thoughts are and share them, right? In a clear way. It helps kids share them with you, right? So when you ask, what's going on with you, instead of them saying, I don't know, right? You're being a model for them and showing them, oh, okay, this is how you do it, right? So there's something to, there's this idea of modeling calm regulation. So kids borrow our nervous systems. And what that means is they pick up on everything, right? They pick up on everything we do. Not that we have to be with them every time that they regulate, but when something really hard is happening with them, just being able to sit beside them and literally breathe or give them a hug, anything like that is kind of the idea of co-regulation, right? It seems kind of silly at times, but it really does help. And then structure and warmth, right, is kind of helps you have the best outcomes. Okay, so let's get to kind of this idea of suicide awareness and depression and kind of answer some of those questions of what this looks like, raising those signs of awareness, right? So a little bit of facts. So suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 24, right? So that's pretty significant, that is the second leading cause of death for that age group. So this is something pretty serious, obviously. Rates are higher in rural communities, right, which we are in, often due to isolation, access to means, and stigma, right? That's why it's so important for us, what am I trying to say, our company, our business to get out into your communities, right, and help you out. And then kind of this stigma of you know, and I grew up, I didn't give you a background of, I grew up as a rancher, a farmer, a wrestler, a sports guy, right? So people often ask, how did you end up as a therapist? And well, I just want to help people out and I care for people, right? But I do understand the stigma that I kind of grew up with, that maybe some of these things, diagnoses, anxieties, depression, autism, whatever we're talking about, all right? I grew up thinking they weren't real just because that's kind of what I heard, right? But they're real. It's things that we all experience, and we need to raise that awareness. So warning signs, right? So if you're a parent or somebody that's looking out for anybody that you're concerned about, talking about being a burden or not wanting to live, right? So in these individuals, they're withdrawing, hopelessness, drastic behavior or mood changes, giving away possessions or sudden calm after turmoil. What that means is like they're in a chaotic moment, chaotic, and all of a sudden it's just calm, right? Usually at that point, psychoeducation-wise, usually at that point, they've chosen that they're going to commit suicide, right? Attempt suicide, and so they're calm about it, right? And so that's a warning sign that's kind of hard to pick up on, because sometimes it's seen as like things are getting better, but if it's like really dramatic of a change, then that's something to obviously worry about, right? Now, what are the tools and resources as a parent? Oh, yes.
So, I mean, I guess I wonder about timing wise. I mean, is it like if you're, let's say if your kid's in fight mode or somebody's in fight mode, and do they just switch right onto that, or is it something that?
Yeah.
I mean, is it so they just physiologically just change like that, or is it more
like noticeable?
delayed?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's hard to answer because it's different for every single person. Now, this is where, as a parent or as a community member, if you notice any type of change, whether it's very dramatic or a slow change, right? It's okay to ask questions such as, are you thinking about suicide? If it's been something that they've done in the past or been thinking about, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Asking those direct questions in those moments, because as that's what I do in therapy, right? When I'm talking to people, I don't know what's in their mind or what they're thinking, so you have to ask those direct questions. Now, what has stopped people from asking those direct questions, or parents, is they sometimes, and this is the stigma too, this is something we got to break, is the worry is that if we ask or bring it up, it'll make it more likely that they're going to do it, right? Which is false. What research shows is that if you just ask those questions directly, people appreciate it, right? They appreciate being seen and heard, and they can answer very clearly, no, I haven't, right? Or, yeah, I have thought about it, right? Or, I am thinking about it.
Sometimes with kids, you can tell by their reaction.
Yeah.
Even though they don't answer it, just their stunned reaction that you'd ask that, so will
That too.
tell you yes or no.
That
on the
too.
child.
And talking about kind of children and teenagers, right? And even adults, right? Even I have a hard time expressing myself, and so we often do with kids and teenagers what we call play therapy. And it's not like this playful thing, it's just helping them find different avenues, different ways of expressing themselves, right? So it might be through words, it might be through playing in some sand, it might be through playing with some puppets or something like that, right? Because it's hard for them to sometimes just go out there and say, yes, I am struggling, right? And so there's these different avenues, right? So, yeah, great question. Did that answer that? Yeah.
I just have a quick question. At what age do they understand what suicide is versus do you want to kill yourself?
Yeah, it's a great, this is a great question. So I think it's to different levels, different times.
Mm-hmm.
Some kids that I've worked with that are 7, 6 understand it, right?
Mm.
And some have to wait till they're 12 or 13. And I think when a community is hit with a suicide, right, or like an attempt of any kind or a completion of a suicide, I think it raises that awareness and people talk about it more. And so depending on outside circumstances or within the home, if you're raising that awareness, like it's and either way, this is the general rule of thumb, like either way, if you think that they know or don't know, it's just always good to talk about it and clarify, like, what do you mean by that? Because this is what it means, right? Like to end your life, and we would, do a funeral and all these different things, and you kind of want to bring that clarity to that process, because you never know with some kids. So, Okay, these are really good questions. Let's see if I can get through some. So there's this. It's a 3-step process. QPR. So question, persuade, refer. So as a parent, like we said, question, ask questions, right? It's not going to make it more likely that they're going to attempt suicide or hurt themselves, right? So ask questions, right? And then persuade, right? And that's where parents really come in, right? You can do that through sharing your own experience, right? I was a kid once. I've struggled once. This is what I did. This is what works for me, right? You can also just use other tools, like maybe they find passion in sports or in drawing or color, just anything like that, right? You're gonna help persuade them to do other actions, other thoughts. Yeah.
I have another question, and I guess it may be silly. How in depth do you communicate what you've experienced as a child, if it has been horrific?
Mm-hmm. That is
so that you don't alarm for me it'd be grandchildren at this point, because all my children are raised, but at what level or what depth do you communicate?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
No, that's a great question.
How far do you tell them?
If you've had a hard
happened?
background and hard raising, how much do you share, right?
Yeah.
And
without
I think there's an appropriate age
traumatizing them.
Yeah, because there is such a thing as what we call secondary trauma, right?
Yeah.
Whether they're just witnessing it, seeing it happen, or they hear about it.
Yes.
They can kind of have some of that secondary trauma. So that is a real worry to worry about. And so as a parent, that's kind of where you have your own discretion on how much do I share, how much is it helpful. It's on a case-by-case basis. That's a hard thing to answer, but it's a great question. So. Sorry, I don't think I directly answered that, but if that's a good one.
Well, I shared something with my daughter when she was 11.
Okay.
And she brought it up as an adult that was very hard for her.
To kind of hear.
And she actually now has she's a school psychologist, but she has mentioned that to me. So I've often wondered, did I share too much?
I think that's always.
So it's a good balance.
Yeah, I think there is a good balance, and I guess age appropriate is kind of the best way that we can go about that. I don't know if there's specific lines for that, but as a parent, it's good to just be aware, like, okay, if I don't want to go too in depth with this experience, I can just say, at a time I struggled very much so with a friend, and it was hurtful, and I understand it's hard, right? Okay. Instead of going into detail. So yeah, great question. So so question, persuade, let's see where I'm at, and then refer, right? If you need help as a parent, you're like, what do I don't know what else to do, right? Refer to help, refer to professionals, refer to doctors, things like that. So QPR, QPR. And then obviously there's crisis lines and suicide hotlines. And those aren't only for just people struggling, that's for parents. That's for if you're worried about your kid, you can give a call and say, hey, I'm worried about my kid. They'll walk you through some of the signs that you're seeing and help you feel more comfortable if you need to kind of take some action steps. Oftentimes we do safety plans in therapy sessions, and what a safety plan is just helping the teenager or anybody I do a safety plan with to know what are the triggers, what are the warning signs for them, right? Of, okay, I'm getting really anxious, depressed, it's causing me to go down this, and then we basically plan, okay, what areas, what people can you reach out to, can you go to find support and help? Okay, if that doesn't work, let's look at some resources like the suicide hotline, stuff like that. And then we usually look at removing any weapons, removing anything that they have plans to hurt themselves with, right? And so with kids, I always bring in parents at this point, and we're making the plan with the parents, and the parents help create a safer environment for the kid, locking up guns, whatever that looks like. And then usually at the end, it's just, we need to help whoever I'm making the safety plan with, or whoever we are, what's their reason for living? What's the purpose, right? Sometimes it's silly things like they want to watch a movie that's a year away and it's not made yet. And sometimes it's my family, right?
Okay.
Because I love my family. I want to, my future, right? So those are kind of resources around suicidality, raising that awareness. I guess before I jump to another subject, are there any questions about suicidality, the tools, the warning signs, anything like that? Yes?
Oh, I was just going to remind everyone, the number for that, instead of 911, it's 988.
988, yes.
Yes.
For the suicide
Suicide
hotline.
hotline,
Yeah, and you
yeah.
can call or text that number. So, yes, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I just wonder, so like, as far as autism goes, is suicide something that comes up a lot?
It makes it more, what's the word, more relevant, more,
I didn't hear.
it increases
I didn't hear
that.
the question.
Question was, is somebody that is diagnosed with autism, does it make it more likely for them to have thoughts of suicide or attempt suicide?
Oh,
And
it
it increases.
does or does not?
It does. It increases. Yep.
Okay.
So what I've seen in my own child is, through this is that, at certain times, they completely disconnect or disassociate with reality. They're kind of in their own world, and consequence doesn't seem to matter. So that's one of the more dangerous times, if they're in a bad state of mind about that sort of thing, because it's almost like they're playing a video game or something. I don't know, it's really profound that, but sometimes you can sit and talk to them and they're so lost in their own minds and their idea, and they become completely disconnected. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it is the way it is with autism, is because of that disconnect that they're able to have with reality at certain times, and they kind of, especially if they're feeling like unhappy or something, they kind of tend more to go into that.
Yeah, and it's on a case-by-case basis, right? So, and this is what we'll go into, is that, right, everybody on the spectrum with autism experiences it differently. There's different levels, there's different ways that people experience it, right? And so it's important to just recognize that, okay, if I have a kiddo that is autistic, learning their way and how they experience it, right? That's gonna be an important part. Question?
I just wanted to tell you, autistic children, they're in our world, but under their own terms.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is,
Explanation, right?
the reality of it is that they kind of are in their own little world, okay, at times. But when they're in our world, they're really there under their own terms, and they can open that door and go just like that.
Yeah, and
in their
technically,
own world.
we all can do that, right? To a certain degree, disassociate, right? That's just what we tend to do at times. And disassociation itself kind of is seen as like a bad term, right? But at times it can probably be a healthy thing to go into, right? Or a fun thing to go into, right? Not all the time is it bad, but for the most part it is, right? Because we want to be in the world that we're living in, right? And dissociation is not just out of this world. There's different levels to that.
As I say, the hotline is for the parents, caregivers, friends, anything.
Anything.
Because if you're dealing with this constantly,
Yep.
it's gonna weigh on your mind, and you need to,
Yeah.
even though you don't necessarily need help, you're not a diagnosis, it's gonna weigh so heavy on your mind. Talking to somebody else will give you the clarity to help your child. It will clear up the clarity to help your child or friend or whatever more.
Yeah, correct. And they give you great resources. Like they're trained professionals as well, whether it's phone calls or text or anything. They are awesome at giving you a case-by-case basis of
And the support
information.
you need.
Yep, it's really good. So let's get into autism a little bit, since we're kind of leading into that as well. So autism is a developmental difference that affects communication, behavior, and sensory processing. It's called a spectrum because every individual is different. Some need a little support, others need more. It's not caused by bad parenting. It's a brain-based condition present from the early development. And just like, some of us are born with different physical challenges or elements, this is just another way that the brain, right? Sometimes when we're born or developmentally, it's just different, right? And that's okay, and that's why we get a spectrum of different. So some common signs of this are social challenges, trouble with eye contact, conversation, or reading or social cues, repetitive behaviors like hand flapping or lining up items, deep focus on favorite topics, right? Oftentimes it's sometimes hard for these individuals to make friends because they get so excited about a topic and they'll sit there and talk about it for 20 minutes and they just lose people right after 20 seconds because they're so excited about it. There's nothing wrong with it, right? It's just some of those social cues and those repetitive behaviors, they just go with it, right? And nothing wrong. Sensory sensitivity, so like with touching, sounds, overwhelmed by sounds, textures, lights, smells, and prefers routines. Change can be can cause distress, right?
Diet can be on that too.
Diet can be on that too.
Because a lot of them don't. They'll only eat certain things.
Because of the
100%.
texture?
Because of the texture, the taste, or if it, yeah.
Just any of it, smell, right? We have our 5 senses, right? What we can see, what we can hear, taste, touch, smell. Any of those are those sensory things that cause differences, yeah.
What are some things that you wish that like friends of, like, so if I had a friend whose child has autism, or I have a neighbor, or there's someone I know in my community, what do you wish outside people would do more for those with autism?
First off, just normalize that there is different, right? That's a great question, is normalize that we literally are all different, and just because someone talks about some topic for 20 minutes doesn't mean there's something wrong with them or we make fun of them or bully them. It's just they're passionate about that, right? And there can be little ways that are very meaningful that can help out these individuals, like helping them, instead of letting them go for 20 minutes, you might, softly interrupt them and ask a different question going a different direction, right? And
Redirect them?
redirect. Yep, that's what I was looking for, redirect. So just little things like that make a big difference. But this idea of normalizing, like, hey, it's okay to be different, right? But then what do we do with that, right? Because here's what it is, right? Someone had said it before, they are living in this world, right? And in this world we have been socialized, we go to jobs, we go to school, we go to all these things, we socialize, right? In these different ways. We have these written and unwritten rules. And so unfortunately for these individuals, right, or fortunately, they're living in this world of difference, right? And they're adjusting to this. So you can help them adjust, right? And learn these little rules of like, hey, it's not that I don't want to not hear about this cool subject that you love for 20 minutes. It's just you might lose people, right? And you've lost me a little bit. And that's not saying that I don't love you or I don't like you or like what you're talking about. You just lost me, right? So stuff like that. Great question. Great question. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think on that to just like help them build connections. It can be very isolating for individuals, especially when they don't know how to make peers. So peers their own age really help. And just that connection of like, hey, let's, see what friends want to come play or organize a play date and just kind of help them feel a part of the community.
I have a question. How would you help your kids understand what autism is and why their friend's a little different?
Yeah.
How would you do that?
That's a great one. So normalize that, honestly, they're different from them, right? You can flip the coin and say, do you notice that you're different from them, right?
Okay.
It doesn't make you wrong or bad or anything. It doesn't make them wrong or bad. I think you can zoom out and take a perspective of it and just notice that we're all different, right? And that's that idea of normalizing. And then, like I said, this is the hard thing because as we have normalized already, on the spectrum, it just looks different for everybody. Everybody experiences it differently. And so just normalizing that, hey, they like routines. They don't like to eat this certain thing, and that's okay. And just as like a parent of a friend, just normalizing those things and not saying, yeah, that's weird, right? Just saying, yeah, it's they're normal. It's what they do. It's kind of just normalizing that.
Okay.
So is it a myth that some people that have what we consider a spectrum disorder can sometimes outgrow it? Or have they just learned to adjust to the world in what looks like a more normal fashion?
That is a great question. Because let's look at the past, right? When no diagnoses were around, people did just have to adjust, right? And it's not that they didn't have the diagnosis that we have considered on the spectrum, right? And so that's a great question, right? And everybody experiences it differently. And so I don't know if you could ever outgrow it. I don't know that as a fact. I'd have to do a little bit more research myself. We have a couple, so as a part of our team, we have people that do autism testing. And I wish one of them was here to answer a question like that. They have a little bit more background on that. But from my understanding, it's not something you grow out of. It's just something that is a part of you. It's you, right? And that's okay. And you learn to adapt, and you learn to function and in the world that they live in, and be successful, right? Some of the most successful people in the world are autistic, right? Because they've learned to do wonderful things with it, right? So it's really beautiful and awesome stuff. It's just, how do we help people do that, right?
I always tell my kid Elon Musk is autistic.
There you go.
I gotta head back, so I just wanted to be here to support you guys, and I love that Chris, you organized this event. One thing that I wanted to touch on for parents, I know that I get this all the time in parent-teacher conferences. They ask, well, why won't my kid tell me? It's not that you're doing anything right or wrong. It's just that maybe they want an outside source or an outside perspective or an outside viewpoint, and we're literally just a second line of defense. You guys as parents are first line, but it's not it's not that you're not asking the wrong questions or the right questions. It's just sometimes somebody else is just a little bit safer. Yes.
As a person who was an autistic child, I can feel like I can say that autistic children most often want the truth. And if we feel like our parents are gonna answer a biased answer, then we're not gonna ask them that question.
I love that. Exactly.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, yeah. Thank you, Gemma.
Yeah, and it just, yeah, so thank you guys for, if you guys have anything, I know that I'm here with Sandstone. Something that's come up publicly is like, well, you're in the school, of course I'm gonna know you in the community, but we are under strict restrictions, not by law, but by everything, that you're protected, your information's protected.
Confidentiality.
Yeah, it's top priority. So if you guys ever have any questions or want me to help you get in touch with Dusty, please let me know.
And we have other people that come too, so thank you, Gemma.
All right,
Gemma.
thanks, Dusty.
Grab a cell phone on your way out.
Okay.
I'll try and wrap this up, because I just realized we're way over time on me, which is okay, but these are great questions, guys. I love it, and we all have the validating that there's so many different questions for so many different reasons. It validates that there's lots of difference, right, in what autism is and what mental health is and suicidality. Like, this is a serious topic, and we need to take it seriously. And you have resources, right? You have us, you have Southwest Behavioral Tech. They're wonderful. I've met most of their therapists, if not all of them. They're wonderful. We have like Becky Dalton and a couple other private therapists here in town. And so you've got
Intermountain Health is really good.
Intermountain Health. So we've got resources here, and we're just one of them, right? And so we're doing our part here. We're just helping raise awareness. So just really quickly, tools and supports for autism, and then I'll kind of wrap up here, is visual schedules, and social stories help with understanding routines. Speech, occupational, and play therapy can build skills. Programs like Zone of Regulation, which is like, I don't know, red, yellow, blue, green. Red is I'm angry, blue is I'm sad, yellow is I'm happy. Just having some sort of check-in as a parent with your kid to help figure out what zone they're in is a helpful thing. Or a 5-point scale. 1 means, you know, we're really good, or 5 means we're really bad, or vice versa. Just making a scale of some sorts to check in with your child and each other to help raise that emotional awareness. And then normalization of people being different and processing different is a big thing. Let's see, parenting tips just in general for all mental health is just using simple, clear language. Create predictable routines. Again, that consistency, routines, it just helps kids learn and get into that routine, right? Set aside 15 minutes of what we might call special playtime. Obviously, this looks different with a 4-year-old compared to a 15-year-old, right? But 15 special minutes, whatever you want to call it, just focus on them, and you're connecting with them. they're leading the play, they're leading the conversation, whatever they want to do with that, obviously with some boundaries. Focus on strengths with mental health as well, but autistic kids often show deep focus, honesty, creativity, right? As we've heard, right, that honesty is an important factor of that. Scaffolding, communication, slow down, give space, use clear instructions, focus on strengths. Many autistic individuals excel in logic, focus, honesty, and memory. So there's so many different ways, right? And I did want to throw this in there, right? There's helpful, obviously, research-based therapies and models and other resources in the community. I guess I'm only speaking on the mental health ones, right? So play therapy. There's therapists around here I know that do play therapy, and that's a helpful way of helping anybody, but especially kids, have a different way of expressing themselves, right? Of learning how to express themselves. But also as a parent, these are the coolest sessions I have. I'll be with a kiddo that we'll be playing in the sand. They'll set up this scene, and it's not of their lives, but it has something to do with it. And then we bring in a parent, and they just explain the scene, and it's like, whoa, we learned so much just from helping kids express themselves in a different way. So play therapy, obviously there's school resources, there's community resources, IHC, the hospital, doctors, everything that goes into that. Another one I did want to hit on is equine therapy with horses therapy.
Oh, yeah.
It's a unique one. It's shown to really help with autism. So that's a great resource. I know of a couple. Well, I know of one for sure in Cedar. So if you're interested, let me know.
Is that only with horses or other animals as well, or is it just?
This one's just with horses. But I'm sure research.
But any like autistic kid when it comes to animals.
Because of that sensory, some of them like the fur, they like, yeah. So it's just, and we all like that, right? So yeah, there's so many things I want to hit on, but we'll kind of wrap it up. Just kind of want to raise this awareness. Kind of want to, the big thing I want to focus on, just kind of closing, is we just need to normalize these things, right? This is a community that cares. This is a community that wants to understand and help people out. And whatever position you're in, either a parent or in the community or anything like that, you can do a lot of good. And it just takes one conversation. It takes one helpful thing that you say to somebody that's dealing with something hard, whether it's suicidality or depression or autism or anything, right? It goes a long way. And think about it, if the whole community comes together and makes some changes, like it can do wonders, right? And then we don't have to hear unfortunately about a suicide or things like that. And that's not to get on anybody, because it happens everywhere, and you're doing the best you can. And I want to make that very clear, that we're all here doing the best we can. And so I do want to acknowledge that, and we're just here to apply some more of these things and hopefully raise that awareness and help each other out. So do we want to do questions real quick? If anybody wants to close out?
I think after, we'll stay after if anybody has any questions for any of our speakers.
Okay,
Is that
I'll stay
okay?
after. Yep, that works.
Is that okay?
Yep, totally. I'll stay at the end.
This question about that.
Yes.
Because it's kind of, in my head it's even confusing, but I guess what I'm wondering is, you have a lot of people that are on the spectrum and a lot of people that aren't. But we all come to hard things in our lives that we have to either learn to adapt and somehow get to where you can move forward. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, like, where is the difference?
Where's the difference?
Yeah.
It's a great question, right? Because, because whether you're, I don't know, let's just say you're a teacher or somebody in the community that wants to be helpful for someone that you're seeing go through a hard time, maybe that you've been through. And I think that's the thing is, like, I see people on the spectrum, I see people with depression, anxiety, I've seen it all, right? I've seen traumatic stuff, I've heard about it, I've dealt with it, whether it's this issue. Everybody deals with things differently, and to help that person, that individual, find their way to process through it is probably the most important part, right? To help them find their way, and sometimes that's coming to a professional, right? And other times it's it's a struggle for 5 years to find it and to help, and but hopefully eventually we find it, right, for that person. Because really we're here to change lives and make it better. But that's a great question. I don't know if I completely answered it, because it's a hard thing. Yes, we all deal with hard things, but we all manage it
I guess
differently.
what I'm trying to say is, like, in what way is it, like, I assume it's harder for someone with autism to have like a
In different ways.
on top of that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I'm like a little bit confused.
I
Like,
could
how would you
probably-
handle it different, or?
I could probably check, okay, so one of my sons has what used to be called Asperger's, has a high functioning spectrum disorder. When he's experienced really traumatic things in his life, at first it's like he doesn't even know. I mean, he knows, but he doesn't, it's like it doesn't matter, you know, he doesn't display anything, and he carries it. And he processes it little by little, and there could be anger outbursts months after that, and you find out that he was upset about something that happened with this trauma, and he's taking it out on you or somebody else. So with my son, it comes out in little pieces. And his grandfather died a couple of years ago, and when he first found out about it, it was like, oh, well, you know, Pop was dead. Well, you know, I mean, it was really emotionless. It was very cold, and he's still 2 years later. He's still working all of that out. So I know it can be different depending on, but it's like that disconnect that I was talking about. It's almost like a self-preservation mode or something like that, you know, like a protection mechanism sometimes, because yeah, I think it does hit them so hard that their brain just goes into like, okay, I'm not dealing with this right now, I'm gonna put it back here somewhere. And it's very interesting and very hard to deal with, you know, because you don't know when or why. Sometimes when the child has a meltdown over nothing, that's a piece of it.
So I think it's different for everyone. I do appreciate that, because it is different for everyone, and I think, because here's the idea is, we're looking at this, that if someone has autism or on the spectrum, that it's harder. That's not always the case, right? It can sometimes be better or helpful in ways, right? And so that's why, so we call it avoiding all or nothing thinking, and this idea of like, okay, if somebody has this, it's hard. If not, it's easier. And it's like, hey, there's lots of middle ground. I know that's not what you were meaning, but there's lots of middle ground where it can be helpful in certain ways. It can be hard in different ways, right? And that's why it's different for everyone. So I do appreciate that question, and I do appreciate that. We'll save the rest of the questions for after, because we got other presenters. I'm so sorry, but thank you. So I'll be here. So ask me questions. I'll be here the whole time, after, during, whatever works. Thanks, guys.
I really appreciate Dusty's presentation, because since he's the therapist, I am going to be sharing my story more of the client point of view. So my name is Grace Howard, and I am a mentor and coach for parents. This was kind of by accident that this all came about, and so I'm excited to share with you my story. From as early as I can remember, I dreamt of becoming a mom. I wanted nothing more than to become a mom. And as a 4-year-old, I remember just laying there in bed, and my biggest dream in the world was to create homes where kids felt like they belonged. And that was so important to me to be able to do that. Well, when I held my first little baby, I will never forget that feeling, as I'm sure all of you know how wonderful that is to hold your first child. But the thing that really I will never ever forget about that experience was the things that God put on my heart, because He put something in my heart that I had never even considered until that day. But He put this thought: never treat this little one the way your parents treated you. Now, for me, that flew in the face of everything that I knew. That seemed disrespectful, that seemed inappropriate, that seemed judgmental. I hated that thought in my mind. But it came with such peace and such truth that I had to keep thinking about it, and it kept coming back. And I just kept wondering, okay, well then, what else could I possibly offer my child? Because my parents had given me a roof over my head. They had given me shelter and clothes and food. I was a hard worker. I had high standards. I was service oriented. Like, I had a lot of qualities that we hope our kids will have. And I just kept asking God, what the heck could I possibly offer my child that is different than what my parents did? And God's answer was very simple: connection. And still, that word is so powerful to me, because as I thought about it, I realized I honored my parents. I loved my parents. I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to do what they raised me to do. I wanted to make sure that I was just there for them. But I didn't feel like I could be myself around my parents at all. I was very nervous about bringing up mistakes around them. I was very scared of what would they think if they really knew me? If I was funny around them, or if they knew I liked a certain talent or a certain thing, or I was just really nervous around my parents. I was also struggling with severe depression at the time of my first baby. And at that point, I had kind of known about the word depression for a few years. I didn't really know if it was what I had. I was kind of living under this blanket of this idea that kind of Dusty had explained of, I didn't really think it was a real thing. And I started going to therapy, and it was very amazing. The whole process was very enlightening of what I had no idea. It was a whole new world that I had never experienced before. And I was shocked by my diagnosis. Not only did they confirm, like, yes, you have depression, they also said you have ADHD and anxiety and bipolar and, this was a totally different thing, but dyslexic. And I was like, oh yeah, that's fun. But this was the thing that really shocked me. They said CPTSD. And as I explained more of my background and what I had gone through as a child to my therapist, he said, you have CPTSD from verbal, emotional, mental, physical, sexual, and religious abuse. And for those who don't know, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. That is when a big major event in your life happens, and it's very shocking, like maybe a car wreck, or if you're in a different country and a bomb blows up, or you see someone die, like very shocking events. That's PTSD. CPTSD stands for complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And that happens drip by drip, day by day, little tiny paper cuts after paper cuts that are never addressed. And so I got to learn more about that, and that's one thing that I cannot emphasize just how important it was to go to therapy in the first place, of just being able to put names to things. But as I was doing that, I also felt still immense guilt, because I was still worried about what good will it do me if I learn that I have these things. Like, who cares if I have these things, because they're still my parents. This is still my family. This is still the life that I have to live. So why does it even matter that these diagnoses were given to me? And the more that I have learned from therapy, and the more that I have gained from just seeking out answers and finding answers, it has given my brain and my experience and my situation more information to make choices moving forward. And I didn't want this to be my story. I didn't want any of these things to happen to me, but they did happen. And the more that I have learn to talk about them and learn to be open with them, I have been so honored by how many people have come up and said thank you, because nobody's talking, nobody's saying any of this, and just to know, like, these things do not taint your character if you've gone through them as a child or at any other point. These things are stuff that is done to you, and there is so much hope in healing. There's so much moving forward. I wanted to change and build better relationships with my kids, but I did feel very lost in how the heck was someone like me, with all of my background and all of my triggers, supposed to just function in front of this little one. I was very burnt out. I was so depressed when we were first married. I barely ever got off the couch. I was just locked inside our little basement apartment. I would get up, I'd take our child into the living room, I'd turn on Dora or some other movie, and I would just sit on the couch, and I had no motivation to do anything at all, and it was such a hard time. I was very anxious. I was very anxious about big crowds, very anxious about talking to anybody. It was very, very, very hard to just get out and go to church or get out and go to any community event. And then, so because of all the conflict I had in myself, as soon as we added 2 children and there was more conflict between them, that only skyrocketed more of my feelings of just feeling lost. I was very reactive too, and whenever they would start just getting on each other's nerves or not listening when I asked them to do something, I would just start, okay, here's a punishment, do this and do that, and why can't you listen? And I would just start yelling at them and trying to get them to behave, because I didn't understand how to make it different. I didn't know what to do different, and I wanted them to know that they are wonderful human beings that should be able to get along, so just snap out of it. And most of all, it always left me feeling inadequate. I felt at that point that there was really no hope. I felt like I was going to constantly be reacting to my kids' outbursts, and that we didn't have a connection. And that terrified me, because I did not want to lose those tender feelings of when they were a young child. And along the way, I learned the value of getting very specific about what I needed. So going to therapy was very helpful in diagnosing and being able to put a name to things, so I could research things and I could understand them better and I could apply them better. But some of the things that I was feeling frustrated in is when I was in therapy, it felt really good and I felt validated. But as soon as I stepped out of therapy and back home, I felt like I was in the battlefield again. And I was like, I have no skill set. I have nothing. All these wonderful ideas, I still felt so triggered that I didn't feel equipped to handle anything that my kids were bringing up. And so I took these 3 things. These were the things that I said I need most, more than anything. I need traditions of truth. And to me, this meant I grew up in a home where I didn't see good habits. I grew up seeing my parents fight all the time. Punishments were like candy on Halloween. We weren't a close family, and we were always in close proximity, but we were not close. And I wanted traditions that I knew would work, that I didn't have to try out, and hopefully years down the road, some of them would work, and maybe some wouldn't. I needed concrete, these are going to work. I also wanted a guide. I wanted somebody who knew my shortcomings and who understood how to work with me with my shortcomings, how to empathize with where I was, as well as just have compassion with me while I was growing skills, because I felt so inadequate, guys. And I needed a success gauge. I needed some way of knowing if I was doing it right. I needed to know before I spent years on something, if I was going in the right direction or not. And again, God's answer was learn of me. Now, this is not about a specific religion, but just like I mentioned earlier, when the therapist said that he believed that I had experienced religious abuse, religion was very scary to me. I have always believed there's a God, but there was a time where he was very terrifying being to me. And scriptures were hard to read, and I hated going to church, and I hated being around people that talked about God, and it was very intimidating because the way that my parents functioned in our home and governed things, religion was the controlling point, and I had learned very negative things in accordance with religion. So when this answer came of learn of me, my thoughts were, okay, I've read the scriptures lots, and I'm still in the place where I'm at. I've done everything I'm supposed to, and I still feel depressed, I still feel anxious, I still want to end my life. And the first time that I had tried to commit suicide was when I was 9 years old. And as my kids were growing, I was terrified that that would become their reality, because I was still, at that point in my marriage, I was still fighting for my life to every day. And I'm so grateful now that, like, that's been years since I've had those kinds of thoughts or feelings, but they were so real to me, and I did not know life could exist without those kinds of feelings. So I started asking, what was I supposed to look for in the scriptures? What was I trying to find that was going to be different? And this was the scripture that kept coming back to me. But covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet show I unto you a more excellent way. And Corinthians 12 in the Old Testament, the whole thing is talking about spiritual gifts. And it just lists out all these amazing spiritual gifts, and I just kept feeling like I needed to learn more about these spiritual gifts in my life and what they look like in a healthy form. So I started going to therapy and taking the secular beliefs and wonderful tools that are available to us, and I started applying them to my understanding of scripture and my understanding of who God was in my life, and it changed everything. And through doing that, I found what I call godly traditions. Like I said, I did not grow up in a home where love and charity and kindness and turn the other cheek and being there for each other and being patient with each other and our weaknesses, that those things were normal. I grew up where there was a lot of condemnation and a lot of frustration and a lot of hate. And as I studied more of these spiritual gifts, I started to gain hope in the fact that there really are godly traditions that God has put on the earth today that allow us to learn directly from Him and how to have a guide, somebody who does know perfectly our situations and what we're going through, and can help us know. There's so many success gauges that He helps us know if we're going in the right direction. So before, if you have felt like I did, where I was feeling lost and burnt out with depression, and I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, and I was anxious, and I couldn't deal with conflict. I had no idea what to do when there was conflict, and I didn't know how to fix my reactivity to my kids, and just those feelings of inadequacy. Through godly traditions now, with discipline and being around my kids and how to move forward, I truly do feel clarity, and I'm rejuvenated. I have not had to deal with depression controlling my life for years. I feel peaceful. I'm very connected with my kids. I am amazed by the transformation. I wish that you guys could have seen. I don't, because it's kind of humiliating, the kind of person I was before, but I wish that you could have seen who I was before, because I was barely making it, guys. And now, every time that we're out in the store or we're around friends or everywhere I go, people are constantly coming up and being like, how did you do it? I want what your kids have. How are they so connected? What are you doing? And it amazes me. And so I've just started sharing my story, because I know that there's so many people who are like, we want more conversation on these topics. And I have been proactive instead of reactive. I cannot tell you the mental and internal peace that I felt about finally being able to show up the way that I wanted to as a mom. And so if you want to, these are, you can take like a screenshot of this, but these were the main things that I started looking up in the scriptures, out of the scriptures, of just the kind of traditions that I wanted in my home. And as I did this is what made the difference for me. These were the bridges. And so you can do those on your own. I do coaching calls. I am still getting my license in therapy. I'm going through school right now. But I have been helping people for a while, and it has been so exciting to just see the hope every time I get off a call. Parents are just talking about how I had no idea, and I finally have hope again, and I know that I can have the tools that I need, and I didn't know that this was possible. I didn't know, and it's just one call. And I also have a scripture guide that if anybody wants to do that, but I have a paper over here that you can put your phone number, email on. If you are interested in either of those, or if you just have questions. I'm really here just sharing my story, sharing what worked for me, and helping, because so here's a little bit off script. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but most of my dear friends are not members of my church. And the thing that I have loved more than anything is that when we love God, when we love truth, all of the answers are still available to us. The Bible is my favorite. I search it up and down, and there's so many things in there that are just available to us. And before, I didn't know how to understand it. So I'm just here as a resource if any of you could use it. And thank you for your time. Oh,
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
If you could go to the screen back,
okay.
I want to know what burden of light means.
Burden of light. Okay, so each one of these. So in the scriptures, God says that His burden is the light. And so for me, I looked a lot into that of like, what does that mean and how do we apply that? And what I have found, as short answer, is that when we feel burdened down or heavy, we can know that we're pointing in a direction that is not serving us or our kids. That it should feel light, it should feel hopeful, it should give us something to look forward to in the future.
Like anxiety. When you have anxiety,
Yeah.
you know there's something that you're missing.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. What does it mean by congruency?
Oh, congruency. Oh, that's a good question. I love that one. So congruency is basically the ability to see how relationships work. One of the things that I had to learn was I was trying to create good people out of my kids, and I realized that they are already good people. My job is to connect with them. Congruency is like if my husband was stepping out of line with what he said he would do earlier that day and it didn't happen later on, I wouldn't like, okay, well, I'm taking away your phone. I would treat my kids the same respect that I give my husband. Just being able to be a congruent person, seeing our gaps and how we can align.
Okay, like giving them like self-identity, like they are themselves, and you're like, treat them as a regular person,
Mhm.
not like below you.
Yeah, they're not above or below,
Yep.
but they are an equal to you.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank
Anybody
you.
else have any questions?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
okay. That's okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll try to be quick. A lot of times my presentations that I have are supposed to be an hour long. Christy said 15, 20 minutes, but I'll try to get through this as quick as possible. Then if you do have any questions after, you can visit with me. I'm Melissa Veater. I think most of you know who I am. I look across the room and know most of you. I am a licensed prevention specialist with Southwest Behavioral Health Center, and I've been there almost 21 years. I've been doing a lot of things in the community. We do a lot of focus on families, substance abuse prevention, and mental health prevention. This was an interesting topic. I had to do a little bit of research on autism and how it tied into mental health, but it really kind of didn't surprise me much about what I thought. A lot of our children, including those on the spectrum, deal with a lot of the same, they go through a lot of experiences in their life that can be challenging. One of the thoughts I had about the question in the back that somebody had about, do does an individual grow out of autism? Is my thought is that they learn the skills that they need to help get through life and get through those situations. So my presentation will kind of, I think, show that today on that. So when I think about mental health and suicide prevention, I think about two different topics. I think about we are preventing suicide in the moment, saving a life when somebody's in a crisis situation. And then how do we prevent individuals from getting into a crisis situation? So I'm going to focus a lot on how do we prevent from getting into a crisis situation in general. There's three things that I'm going to focus on today is brain health. So how do we keep our brain healthy? Resiliency, so the ability to bounce back after a hard situation, and skills. What skills do we need to learn to problem solve and manage our stress and things like that? All of those kinds of things that kind of drive us into maybe a crisis situation. So I want you to kind of think about what is your role here today? Am I here as a parent? Maybe for myself, what are some of these things that I can learn to take back to help myself? How can I help? Am I a caregiver for an individual? How can I help this individual get through teach them some of these skills? Or can I work with my own children to recognize those that might be struggling? How can I help them to be kinder and maybe make those connections with others? So quickly, I know that this was touched base a little bit on, so I'll just be quick. So on my research, that individuals on the spectrum disorder face significantly higher rates of suicidal thoughts, behavior, death by suicide compared to general population. Some of the potential contributing factors are communication differences. So challenges communicating, communication difficulties can lead to that feeling of loneliness or isolation, like people don't understand me, or I don't understand an individual, so I'm just not even going to communicate with them in the first place. So leads to the isolation. Social interactions, so a lot of times trying to fit in with their non-autistic peers, or they try to camouflage and try to hide their autistic traits to fit in. And a lot of times those on the spectrum can experience some form of bullying. Challenges with adapting to change or shifting focus can exacerbate the distress that an individual might feel. Difficulties identifying and expressing emotions, which can hinder coping mechanisms. Inadequate access to appropriate health care and supportive services. And all of these can increase mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and mood disorders in those on the spectrum. So I'm going to first start out with talking about how do we keep our brain healthy. So there's a couple of doctors, a lot of this information, there's lots of mental health specialists out there, and they talk about the healthy mind platter. So what are the things that we can do? There's 7 things to keep our brain, specifically our brain, healthy. So no matter if you're a high school student, no matter if you're somebody on the spectrum, if we're working towards retirement, anybody in a job, these are all things that we need to do. So the first thing is focus time. Focus on a task, so we need to stay focused. We need to challenge our brain to do things, make those deep connections inside of the brain. You always hear of, we gotta do my crossword puzzles to keep my brain, especially for older people. We need to keep challenging our brain, keep making those connections in the brain. We also need playtime. We need to allow ourselves to experience and play outside. It can be planned or spontaneous. So playtime, we've got to have that playtime. We've got to have that laughter, that enjoyment. And this includes everyone, including those on the spectrum, engaging with them. Connections, connecting with other people in person. This releases the happy hormones. I'm going to talk about those in just a couple of minutes in our brain. So do activities together, parents with children, bond with your kids, spend time with your kids. And again, everything I'm talking about can be for those on the spectrum or off the spectrum as well. Making those connections, finding the things that they like. Maybe it's finding a video game. If they're into video games, then sit down with them and play and connect with them and understand what are the things that they enjoy, and you make that connection with them. If it's lining up cars in a particular order and color, and sit down with them and do that activity with them and make that connection with them. Sleep time. Our brains need rest. They need that opportunity to recover. All of us, teenagers, adults, we've had a long work day. We need to have 8 hours is the recommended amount of sleep time. every night. Sometimes that is hard. I go through these moments where I'm like, should I go out and work out today, or should I make sure I get my 8 hours because my life is super busy? I utilize this a lot. Like, I need to take time out. I need to have that playtime. I need to go do something fun. My brain needs that. I need to disconnect from that focus time, but also I need to stay engaged and have that focus time. So it's all about a balance. We need to have physical time, keep our bodies moving and healthy. This is good for our brains. Walking outside, exercising, movement, that actually can help de-stress our body and strengthen our brain specifically. So exercise is really good for strengthening your brain. We need time in where we're quietly reflecting and focusing on our feelings. So a lot of times people meditate, pray, and process things that have happened for the day. So just taking that time in and reflection and downtimes. This is so important. Our brains need time to relax and recharge, not necessarily sleep. Disconnect from our iPads, our phones, TV, and just sit and be and just be. One of my favorite things to do when I'm really stressed is sit outside in the sunlight and just sit there and just listen to nature. That helps me a lot. So we need that downtime. So these are 7 things. I saw some of you taking pictures of that. Great. Happy hormones. So our bodies produce happy hormones. We have to do things to get these hormones going. So dopamine, the reward chemical. So when we complete a task, when we celebrate that, our body actually knows, like, I completed something, yay. It secretes some dopamine. Eating food, practicing self-care, celebrate those little wins. Oxytocin, the love hormone. Playing with an animal, spending time with animals, holding hands, giving a compliment, hugs. We did a presentation a couple years ago about the 8-second hugs. You need 8 hugs, 8 times a day. We need to be with people. We need to disconnect from our social media and our phones. We need to spend time. We need to hug. We need to sit by each other. We need to spend time together to secrete that love hormone. Did you have a question, or should I?
Yes, and when it comes to a hug, doesn't the hug have to be for a few seconds? It can't just be,
Yeah, it says 8 seconds.
To release the hormone or something?
Yes.
What is it, 10 seconds?
8 seconds.
8 seconds.
8 hugs, 8-second hugs 8 times a day.
Yeah.
Serotonin, so a mood stabilizer, so walking out in nature, being exposed to sunlight. I actually tell people, when I sit in the sun, it feels to me like literally like it's recharging my body. Like I've always felt that way to me, and the more I learned about these, I'm like, that makes sense why I just, even sometimes during work, Kelsey will see, I just go sit out back on the picnic table in the sun. I need a disconnect, I need that brain break, I need that sun. All of those things help us. Running, meditating, endorphins, laughing. We need to laugh, we need to have laughter in our life. Do you ever think, like, when I want to spend time with people who make me laugh and make me feel good? So how do we be that for somebody else? So these are all kinds of things that we can do for ourselves. We can teach our children, and we can teach our children to do with other children, like laugh, engage.
Dark chocolate.
Eat chocolate, yes. I just put this slide up because I think we, as a society right now, not only our youth, but adults are experiencing a lot of mental health challenges. Yeah. We're seeing suicide rates go up, suicidal ideations, and when we look at how we're spending our time, and when we're talking about the things I'm talking about today, we wonder why. So yes, I just wanted to put that up. So my second thing I wanted to talk about is resiliency. So how do I build resiliency in myself? How do I help build resiliency in my child? Acceptance. In life, it's full of ups and downs. There's things we can't change. Somebody had mentioned that in the back. Like, there are things that in our life we can't change. We can't control everything, but we can work to control the things in our life. Optimism, be positive when we're confronting challenges. So there's a growth mindset. I'll show you a little bit about that here in a second. Actually, I'll just show you right now. Growth mindset. So instead of saying, when you're completing a task or you're doing something like, I give up, this is stupid, it's too hard, I'm not smart, I don't know how to do this, is how do we put the positive on it? I won't succeed if I don't try. How can I improve at this? Practice makes me better. I'm really smart when it comes to this. Like, how do we promote that in our children? We're such a sport-oriented community, and we send our kids to practice every day. They work hard, they do drills. They keep challenging themselves, they keep getting better. So just helping encourage our kids to use these words when they're doing something. If they are lining up their cars or playing their video game, this is stupid, I'm stupid, I'm always making mistakes, I can't do this. How do we shift that? And it's like, mistakes is how we grow and how we learn. You would do such a great job at this, and giving that positive. Yes, Dion?
I just wanted to share something that happened the other day. My son ran off and he ran away, and I had to go find him under a tree, and he was crying because he wasn't good at something, or as good as somebody else was. And I told him, well, I said, you know, God gives everybody different talents. You may not be good at something, but look at all this other stuff you're good at. And I had to tell him, I said, you know, I'm not good at a lot of things. I think I'm fairly good at cooking, you know, that's what I do. But I said, I have things that I do that I'm good at. And so I said, focus on the things that you're good at, because that's what makes you happy, and that's where you're going to be successful.
I love that.
Don't constantly hate yourself on the things you can't do.
Yeah. And I love that, and that was great, and how could you help him be in life? But let's work together on this. Maybe if we work on this every day, you can get better on that.
Right,
or how do we set them up for that? So talking about that, does somebody grow out of being autistic, or do they learn some of the skills that they need to fit in and do the things that they need to do? Yes.
You could also use, like, especially with autistic people, it doesn't, like the process of elimination, say, okay, good, we found one way it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, we know not to do that, and that narrows, so now we are better prepared for success.
Yes. That's my couple slides up. Thomas Edison, he didn't fail 1,000 times making the light bulb. It was with 1,000 steps. So getting to that. Thank you for that comment. That was great. Stress management. So practicing healthy coping strategies, learning to effectively manage our stress and our anxiety. We learn some of those skills. Those are very helpful in our life. How can we help as ourselves, as parents or caregivers, learn and manage our stress, but also show that, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but mirror that behavior, or I can't think of the word, but yes, demonstrate that behavior to model. Yes, model, thank you. Model that behavior to our children. If we're not effective at managing our stress, and we're throwing things or being, yelling, then that's what they see. And so how do we model that behavior for our children? We need to practice these in ourselves. Healthy lifestyle, so again, taking care of our physical bodies. That also includes our brain, making sure we're giving our brains break, getting enough sleep, all the things I talked about earlier. Building connections and relationships with others. Again, it goes back to those happy hormones. Spending time with others, connecting with others, those emotional touches, builds those connections, builds those relationships. And when I think back to one of my first couple slides about children on the spectrum, or people on the spectrum, of feeling that social isolation, how do we teach our children to say, how do we connect with somebody? Is there somebody who is sitting alone, or if they are somebody who is a little bit different than us, how do we invite them to engage in some of our activities, or invite them to come sit by you, or not laugh at them? We're all struggling to fit in. So encourage our children to build those connections with others, and especially with those who might be a little bit different than that they are. And then develop problem-solving skills. I'm going to use the STEP method. I'll talk about that. I wanted to just quick about Thomas Edison. It's a very good story about growth mindset and problem solving. Thomas Edison, he was relentless and perseverance. Could you think about 1,000 times? I would probably throw that out after 5 times. Like, no, we're gonna live in the dark forever. But relentless perseverance. It took 1,000 experiments, he said, testing various materials to find what worked. The light bulb wasn't invented, or wasn't an instant success. He tried thousands of different materials before finding the material that worked. He learned from his failures and to help him create the light bulb. It took him about 14 months. Sometimes we want something to change overnight. We want to get better at something, the next day, but 14 months. And he used a trial and error method. He learned from his mistakes and used his knowledge to improve his design. So just like she mentioned in the back, so thank you for sharing that. He would go back to the drawing board. What worked? What didn't work? What changes can I make? If that slight little thing worked, what changes can I make this time to make it work? Resiliency is continuously trying to solve a problem or an issue and being able to get through it, be able to bounce back. So problem solving skills, many times there's more than one solution. Sometimes, and sometimes with those on the autism disorder or spectrum, think there's only one solution. That's the only way. If they can't do it, there's no other way. But to teach our children problem solving skills, so anyone can learn these problem solving skills. So what is the problem? Say without blame. And maybe it's, we don't want to always play that game of it's somebody else's fault. This is why this is happening. But what is the problem? Think of what is the solution to that problem. What are brainstorm? Think of multiple ideas and then think, okay, if I did A, this would happen. If I did B, this would happen. And then pick which one you feel is the best and go with it. And then go back to the Thomas Edison. If that didn't work, okay, let's go back again. Where are we at? This is the problem. These are the solutions. These are what would happen. And go through that model and of the problem solving. A lot of times youth, they need this experience, and the younger that we can start working with our kids on problem solving, we problem solve as adults, so we need to help teach our children that. And I know we talked about this already a lot, is many times we look at like a therapist or a counselor as like, that's for those kinds of people, I don't have issues. But really what a counselor is, as they've mentioned, is somebody to go and you can talk to, like, I'm experiencing, you know, X, Y, and Z, or this problem or challenges, or I really am having a hard time with outbursts, or I have all this stress and I just don't know how to manage it. And that's what a therapist is there for, is to help you, give you some of these models and work with you more in depth about how to develop these skills and get through that. I feel like I talked a million miles an hour and skipped through a lot of this information, but some of the key takeaways, we can't always change the situation we're in. We need to look at the knowledge that we have, search for knowledge, and make healthy choices for our bodies, our brains, so that we're strong, to get us through hard times, to develop that resiliency in ourselves and our children, to develop that kindness with others. Also, I just wanted to mention resources at Southwest Behavioral Health Center. We have, Shauna is our case manager here. She works with different clients. We have therapy, our prevention department as well, where we conduct the QPR classes. So Dusty was mentioning, as you were talking about those, we actually teach that. They're about an hour and a half long. So if anybody is interested in learning more about what Dusty talked about, we would be glad to put something together for you. We hold parenting classes, so if you're a parent and wanting to learn some more skills, some of this information that we talked about today, we can teach those. We teach those in the community. A lot of you have seen some of our family events that focus on that bonding, spending time together, building those connections. If we have those connections with our children and we build that good relationship where we're sitting down and having meaningful, connective time, then we will recognize when our children are struggling with something, and they will come to us as well. That was your hour-long presentation in 15 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? And thank you, Christy, for
You're welcome. I just wanted to say one more thing. I forgot to mention, on your way out, grab some goat milk soap. Hillary Bonner donated it for everybody.
Oh, nice.
So, thank you everyone for coming.